Welcome in, everyone, to the It's Official podcast. He's Jeff Siegel. I'm Jeremy Plonk, representing Express Bet and First Bet. Spring is here, not everywhere in the country. Bundle up from some of the weather. Get inside from some of these storms around the country here on this Tuesday as we record our podcast. But in terms of horse racing, this is about as spring as it gets. It's opening week at Keeneland. They'll start their season on Friday. It's Santa Anita Derby week, Wood Memorial, Big Three, Pick Three, with all the big Triple Crown prep races this weekend. We've got a Kentucky Derby future wagers, so a lot cooking. Jeff, Santa Anita Derby in your backyard. This is going to be a great week of racing.
Really is, and it's a pivotal week for the Derby horses and Triple Crown, although not as pivotal, I don't think, as it looked like it was going to be before Fierceness showed up.
Right.
Now it's pretty hard to imagine anybody beating him, although he could beat himself. But we'll discuss that. Muth shipped west for Bob Baffert to win another Arkansas Derby for that stable. You mentioned the Santa Anita Derby this week. We'll draw that tomorrow. Interesting to see how many will actually get into that race. There aren't too many left around here that are even bothering to run. So it's a good week. And but you talk about the beginning of spring. To me, the beginning of spring is always the opening day at Keeneland. How about you?
Yeah, I'll take that any day of the week. Looking forward to my 32nd meet working for Keeneland this year, starting on Friday. And we're talking about the great Phillies in college basketball last night. What a showdown it was. Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, the big Iowa LSU game. We've got the top three finishers from the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Phillies all back in the Ashland on Friday. 1, 2, 3. And just FYI, makes her seasonal debut in that one on the Ashland on opening day at Keeneland on Friday. I can already tell you right now, I've got my eye on a long shot because a long shot always wins the Ashland. So in our advanced handicapping, looking ahead to Friday, we're trying to find a price in that one as bombs away seems to be the case every year. Let's go to the big board. Our 5 topics that we talk about and tackle each week on It's Official start out this way. We had some anxiety in the 3-year-old division trying to figure out who really was on top. And now we have some separation anxiety because it was all about fierceness. After the Florida Derby, the 2-year-old champ showed he is separated from the pack.
They have the favorite to catch. It's Fierceness to the far turn on top by a length and a half. Working harder is Catalytic at the rail. Grandmo the first. Ladam Bro asked to quicken, but he's not. At the rail, it's Conquest Warrior trying to launch his bid. Frankie's Empire is wide on the course, but Johnny V still sitting pretty on Fierceness, who tries to sneak away. 3/4, 1:11-1. They run to the 5/16, and Fierceness, he is getting away. He's now 4 in front. Catalytic is second. Grandmo the first is third. On the outside, Frankie's Empire, Conquest Warrior at the rail, but they all have too much to do. Fierceness is putting on a show in Hallandale today. Fierceness, the real Fierceness, has showed up to South Florida, and he's crushing them in the Florida Derby. Fierceness geared down and on his way to Louisville. Fierceness authoritatively in the Florida Derby. He never had a threat. Catalytic was second. It's a very close photo for third between Grandmo the first and Conquest Warrior. Hades to complete the high five in 1:48-1.
Even in the gallop out, nobody got in the zip code of fierceness in that win. And we've seen that before, right, Jeff? I mean, his debut win by 11 1/4. He won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile by 6 1/4. And he wins this one by, 13 and change. What a dominant performance when he's on. But he's followed up all of those dominant wins with disappointments in his follow-up starts. He's only run 6 times now, or 5 times in his career. Will that 6th start in Kentucky finally be one where he can put 2 in a row together? That's what we've got a month to figure out. But your thoughts on the Florida Derby first?
Well, when we handicapped this race last week, we speculated that this could happen. Because he had done it twice before. Nobody that he was facing had any right to beat Fierceness if he were to run back to his Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He did, and then some. Ran fast, won by a big margin, did it with something left, and did it. I think they've kind of figured out now that he's not blazingly quick leaving the gate.
Right.
And if you draw, somewhere inside or in the middle somewhere, and he breaks a step slow and gets squeezed back, then we could see a bad effort, which is why I think they would love to have an outside draw in the Derby. I don't care if it's 20-20, As long as he can dictate his own pace and not have to worry about getting crowded or bumped or jostled or taken up, I think he's going to be able to run back to this. Certainly the distance shouldn't be a problem.
Mhm.
He's got enough tactical speed to be in front, but doesn't need it, I don't believe. In a field that, as we speak right now, doesn't look like it's going to have a lot of speed in it. That's just the way it is. So, I mean, it's easy to envision Fierceness doing in the Kentucky Derby what he did here, or in the Breeders' Cup, which I think now is going to make him difficult to bet against, unless he gets a bad draw or something weird happens. But that was impressive. That was, dare I say, it was Flightline-esque.
Yeah. And when we look at the Florida Derby in 1:48.22 for a final time, I mean, since they went to a 1.125 racetrack and reconfigured their Gulfstream, there have only been a couple Florida Derbies run any faster than that. Two of them were Big Brown and Always Dreaming. They followed those races up by winning the Kentucky Derby as well. He's in really good company in that regard. Todd Pletcher, of course, two-time winner of the Kentucky Derby. He'll look for his third. For Mike Rapoli, he's had a lot of bad luck when it comes to the Kentucky Derby. Uncle Mo being injured right before the Derby, of course, last year. Forte being forced to scratch. That's going to be a big talk. And if a vet gets anywhere near Fierceness, which they will because that's part of the protocol, there's going to be some nervous thumb twitching, I think, amongst the stable to make sure that nothing repeats in terms of history with Fierceness. Rapoli is the self-appointed commissioner of horse racing now, and he is going to be an absolute mouthful between now and the Kentucky Derby with the way Fierceness is giving him reason to chirp right now, because this horse looks like absolutely the star of the 3-year-old crop. And till somebody this week steps up and says, I'll take the mantle, it's his now, I think, unless, obviously he's got to run the race, and we're not giving him the Kentucky Derby. Many a favorite has been beaten in Louisville, but there's no question he's a standout favorite in the Kentucky Derby right now, unless somebody runs off the screen Saturday.
Maybe Sierra Leone will do that, but not likely, not like what Fierceness just did.
Right.
And in matching up these two horses, one's going to have a huge head start in the first quarter of a mile and a half. Fierceness will be here, and Sierra Leone will be way back there, and that's going to make it difficult for him to catch a horse as good as Fierceness. I think those are the two really at this stage, unless something just completely pops out of the woodwork. Obviously, if Baffert wins the San Diego Derby, that horse or colt will not be a factor. So, I mean, really, it looks to me like, you know what I can't wait for? I can't wait. If Fierceness wins, I can't wait for the Preakness. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, could be an awesome one. Final year, the traditional Pimlico grounds before they raise the building and start the reconstruction project would be a pretty interesting way for the Preakness to go out with a massive showdown this year. We will talk more about some of the other horses that could be Preakness bound, Triple Crown bound a little bit later in our Triple Crown tracker. But you mentioned Bob Baffert and you mentioned his potential Preakness horses. Well, one of those finished up his preparations last week with a flattering win in the Arkansas Derby. It was Muth we're talking about, and the reason it's flattering is Muth couldn't warm up in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last year. So the fact that he played so well out of that Breeders' Cup Juvenile makes Fierceness's resume look even better. Here is Muth at his best in Arkansas.
Around the fourth turn, there goes Muth to challenge Timberlake, and the race is on now. Muth on the outside, strides level. Timberlake back in second as Muth takes command. Muth and Juan Hernandez have a quarter mile more to get, and Hernandez gives them the cue to go, and Muth off the turn, still in front. Timberlake second, Jess Steele third, then Mystic Dan who tries to rally on. Furlong to go. It's Muth. Jess Steele running huge in second. Timberlake third. Muth with a 16th to go. He's opened up by 3, and it's Muth coming down the stretch in Hot Springs to win it. Muth, the son of good magic, wins the Arkansas Derby. Jess Steele second, Mystic Dan third, Timberlake flattens out to fourth.
I don't know what planet makes Timberlake even money in that race, but he was the even money favorite. He should have been co-favorite. It should have been close maybe, but I don't see how Muth is 2-1 and Timberlake is even money. that's the way the public went. I know Brad Cox's dominant run in the Arkansas Derby Series in recent years. I think he'd won like 7 of the last 16 races or something at Oaklawn. Maybe that swayed people, but lest you forget Bob Baffert's dominance when he brings good horses to Oaklawn as well. That was a gift. That was a gift, 2-1 versus even money. Now, you could have said there were other options in the race, but when you look at those two headliners in there, the public just flat out missed it on that one. And Timberlake got exposed for distance, I think, in there. Muth answered the distance test.
Well, you remember our preview of this race last week, last Friday, and we spoke about, at least I spoke about Muth like, well, he's going to win, so let's move on, type of thing. Yeah. And we showed the workout that kind of put us over the top. And I said, he's been up and down, Muth, throughout the spring and the winter. And I think he's really, really up right now because he trained so well. And, in retrospect, running second to Fierceness, nothing wrong with that. You talk about flattering Fierceness. Well, Fierceness kind of flattering Muth too, because Muth actually ran with him, and then kept up throughout the lane. And in coming off a nice win in the San Vicente and then working so well, I thought this was just a gimme. Not to mention the fact that Baffert's done so well shipping in for the Arkansas. Sure. And we also talked about Timberlake, and you asked me about the goosebump scale, and he didn't really register that high in his last race. He won. All in all, I thought if anybody's going to be even money in this race, it's going to be Muth.
Right.
It was the other way around. I didn't see that at all. So in retrospect, 660, if you were as confident as you and I were, that was a gift. I mean, nothing great about 2-1, but it's better than throwing it away too.
Right. I like Liberal Arts for a shot in there at a price, and I bet on a wrestling match on Saturday, not a horse race, because he came out of the gate and Tyler Gaffleone immediately grabbed the hold of him. He hated it. He resented it. They fought each other for about 20 seconds before Liberal Arts ran over half the field on the clubhouse turn and then had to yank out of it, made a nice mid-race move. I mean, he made one of those internal 3 furlongs that tells you he was going to run well that day, but it all went up in smoke for him, I mean, and that's what happens, I mean, that's all it takes sometimes is a horse to lose their head and they're not going to perform up to their capabilities. And that's what you look at with Fierceness and any of the favorites going into the Kentucky Derby. When things go wrong, do they go terribly wrong? Or do the great level-headed horses have a way of overcoming it even when things don't go their way? We saw one Liberal Arts who just imploded on the clubhouse turn when he fought with Tyler Gaffleone. So that's also a lesson too in jockey changes. Christian Torres has ridden a couple of the best rides and some of the best 3-year-olds this year at Oaklawn. He got taken off all of them for the Arkansas Derby for other more named riders. And it didn't work out so well switching to Gaffleone because he did not get along well with Liberal Arts in that particular spot. We'll see. Tyler, he's not riding that great this winter and into the spring. We'll see if it picks up at Keeneland, where he's many times over leading jockey there. It's Saez and Gaffleone when you get to Keeneland. We'll see if Gaffleone can kind of pick it up now because he's getting back to where he typically has a lot of success, but he's not riding that well currently as we speak. So we'll see how it shakes out there. Move to the Preakness makes a lot of sense next. Maybe he'll have company with his stablemate May Moon, who will go, we expect, in the Santa Anita Derby when entries are drawn tomorrow for Saturday, as Jeff mentioned earlier. So at least 2, maybe 3 Baffert horses who could have Preakness aspirations. They could also, as we talked about on this show a couple times already in past weeks, they could separate and not all go to the Preakness because the Belmont just 3 weeks later, also at a 1.25 miles this year at Saratoga versus the 1.5 miles on Big Sandy at Belmont, which Baffert doesn't really take many horses to. But the Saratoga 1.25 miles should be very appealing to him, and I would have to think Baffert will have representation in the Belmont, so maybe he splits them up. But Moose seems more like, I don't know. I mean, Preakness or Belmont, if you had to pick one for Muth, Jeff, which one would you want to go with? Or do you want to see how May Moon runs first?
I think I do, but I think Muth won this race, but I'm not sure he'd be that comfortable at a 1.25 miles. I think there's a lot of difference between a mile and 3/16 and a 1.25 miles, but it all depends on what Bob wants to do with May Moon, assuming May Moon wins the Santa Anita Derby. He may feel that he would like to avoid Fierceness if Fierceness is dominant in the Kentucky Derby. On the other hand, maybe he feels the time is right to try to beat him when the other horses had a hard race and coming back in 2 weeks. They'll dictate what he does.
Right.
One thing about Bob, he doesn't make many wrong decisions. He'll
Yeah.
make a lot. So
There's still a Preakness future wager, and this week a Kentucky Derby future wager. I'm not touching Preakness future wager when it comes to fierceness. Pletcher rarely runs in the race, and when he did have Derby winners who came back into Preakness, they ran terribly. Always Dreaming, Super Saver, they did not fire. He does not like to send horses to the Preakness. He's got a bad record in the race. So if you're playing the futures this week or in a couple weeks when it's time to play the Preakness futures, fierceness is a Derby horse. Find somebody else for the Preakness. I think even if he wins the Kentucky Derby, I'd be wanting to line up to go against him, but that's putting way too many horses in front of the cart as we try to figure out what's going to happen 2 starts from now. Let's go back to the big board, and we move to our Triple Crown tracker sitting right in the middle this week. Third topic up, and we have the race from the UAE Derby last week to take a look back at, a star rising at Gulfstream Park, and we've got a little bit of a look ahead to some races coming up this weekend on the Triple Crown tracker. Of course, 3 big Kentucky Derby preps. First, let's look back, though. We were looking for a lot of goosebumps from Forever Young. He didn't give them to us in the Saudi Derby. Would he do it in the UAE Derby?
Autobahn goes up to apply a bit of pressure. Forever Young still travelling despite being deep as they make their way into the home stretch here in the UAE Derby. Then came Mendelssohn Bay, deeper out Navy Seal, not too far away Panda Gate, still with 4 to pick up. As they get into the running here, Autobahn takes over. Forever Young on the one rein there, but balances up now, comes up to the outside of Autobahn, who has to be brave. It's Forever Young though for Japan, who comes up to the outside of Autobahn, goes past by a length. Forever Young drawing away here in the late stages, and it's another Japan domination in the UAE Derby. Autobahn very brave in second. Third across Panda Gate from Mendelssohn Bay. Then came Navy Seal, Rock Walk, Guns and Glory. Crossing over the line there with Ballon d'Or, and a long last dropping away Oasis Boy to cross over with George Tesoro. And the last one home, Henry Adams, who was pulled out of the contest.
Wanted to leave it through the gallop out there because you saw a happy horse after the wire, still bounding nicely after a mile and 3/16. Look, I thought it was a good effort in Saudi Arabia. I thought this was a better effort. It's still not the spectacular effort maybe that we were hoping to see, but this was pretty good and a step in the right direction for Forever Young.
it didn't look quite as good after a Fierceness one, because that's what you're supposed. That's a 10 out of 10 in terms of the goosebumps scale. But I liked the race. I did, because from what I could gather, he came home really fast last quarter or last 400 meters, whatever it was, in 24 flats. So he was finishing well. The best part of his race was from the quarter pull home. So that's good. And it bodes well for his ability to get a mile and a quarter. And he was wide every step of the way. That may have been by design, just to ensure that he doesn't get the dirt in his face and that he's got a clear sailing. And that was good as well. I don't think I could sit here and tell you that based on his form, he's good enough to beat Fierceness if Fierceness shows up. But I absolutely think he could hit the board. I mean, he's a pro. He's perfect 4 for 4. He handles everything. He shipped everywhere. Nothing's going to phase him. And I like the spacing of his race. He's relatively fresh. I think he's going to run the best race. I can't say it's good enough to win, but I can certainly say it's good enough to hit the board. And I expect him to do that, really.
And this is another one that they'll probably want to be wider in the draw that you were talking about. This was purposeful to keep him outside in the clear. You also saw he wears those red and white pseudo blinkers. They're not blinkers. There's no cup to them. They're actually to protect his face from the kickback because he doesn't like the kickback. That was reported from the Japanese handlers I saw on Twitter that, it's a piece of equipment that is really to keep getting the dirt from kicking back into his face and him resenting it. So if that's the case, you're going to get dirt in your face in Louisville unless you stay to the outside. So I think that, you could probably start to envision a scenario where they want to be towards the outside of the gate. The other thing will be the ship. April 10th is the date that Yoshida Yahagi, the trainer, has said that they will ship to the United States. So you think the Kentucky Derby on May 4th, that's going to give him about 24 days in the U.S. before he'll have to clear quarantine. But he's going to have some time to acclimate to Churchill Downs and to the surroundings, and that's a good thing. This horse did not ship that well, they said, from Saudi Arabia to UAE, and took some time to settle in. So I'm very curious to see how he trains in Louisville. Maybe he starts off in the first time or two you see him, you say, wow, I don't know about this horse. And then he starts to get better and better. That seems to be what happened in the UAE. Let's see what happens in the US and how we overreact to everything, right? Like every step between now and Derby Day, we're all going to overreact to it. So the first time or two we see him on the track and out galloping around and things things like that. If you're not impressed by him, I say be patient with this particular horse because he might improve as he gets a little bit closer to Derby Day. But having these Japanese horses set for the Kentucky Derby and one of this quality, I think is a plus. I love it for the race. I think it's great for the international interest. And look, if you're knocking out number 20 on the point scale, or, T.O. Password is the horse who's getting the Japan Road to the Derby points. And if you're knocking a horse out who's number 20 here in the U.S., I don't mind that at all. You're at the bottom of the list for a reason. You had plenty of races to get up higher on the points list. I think from an international standpoint, it's good to have these horses in the Derby.
I do, especially when it's undefeated. Nothing wrong.
Yeah, when they're good, right? Yeah,
and he's going to have a storyline that'll come with him. And a lot of these Japanese horses have come over and run a lot better than I thought they would. So I'm not going to completely dismiss him, because he does strike me as a colt that might be one who will do more if required. It will be required at Churchill Downs for sure. But you never know. And I'm glad he's coming, and I hope he shows up with his A game and get a pretty good line on him. If you think he'll at least hit the board, I do. So we'll be following him and watching him closely in his preparations prior to the race.
A few more items on our Triple Crown tracker this week. We'll let you know again, a Kentucky Derby future wager with win and exacta pool open this week. It'll be open on Thursday. It's going to close Saturday at 4:00 Eastern, though. So you will not get to see those big 3 races of the preps this week before those final Kentucky Derby future bets. So again, that pool closes at 4:00 Eastern on Saturday. And Jeff, I don't like to say we told you so, but you told them so, that Endlessly is not out of the running for the Kentucky Derby just yet. The Jeff Ruby winner, who's looked so impressive for trainer Michael McCarthy, when they said originally after the race that they're heading to the American turf at Churchill Downs and not the Kentucky Derby, I balked a little. You said horses because he's still going to end up running. It's the Kentucky Derby. Well, it turns out this week we've got some news that Endlessly is back in the Derby picture.
Yeah, and the thing is, Jeremy, I understand it. He's not a speed horse. We know that. So Fierceness, he's going to be in a different county. You don't have to worry about him, okay? Just go back, run the race, and if you run second, what's wrong with that? So I thought he would have a change of heart. Now, Michael McCarthy said, he doesn't really train well on the San Anita main track. Let me say something. Nobody does. Okay, I don't care who you are. Unless you're a Baffert, you're all going to struggle. It's a deep, cuppy, deepish track that especially grass horses don't like. But as you pointed out, no racetrack in America, dirt track in America, is more kind to grass horses than Churchill Downs. And I think that when Michael gets him over there and breezes him on the main track, which he certainly will do, I think he's going to be pleasantly surprised. And I think that's the deal maker. I wouldn't run him either if he breezed badly over the Churchill Downs dirt. I wouldn't do it. But I'm telling you, he's not going to do that. He'll breeze better there than he will here. And based on his form and his style of running, I think he's got an excellent chance to lay back, run his race, rally in the stretch, and if Fierceness is 100 miles in front of him, so be it. But that horse is not going to know it. So I think he should.
And we've seen that Turfway path the past 2 years. We've talked about it already, but 2 years ago it was Rich Strike out of the Turfway Series to win the Derby. Last year it was 2 Phils out of the Jeff Ruby at Turfway to run a dynamite second in the Kentucky Derby. So why not give it a shot? It looks like Endlessly is back in business. Also this week we've got the Bluegrass Stakes to talking about Kentucky prep races. They drew the field today for the Toyota Bluegrass. This race will be on Saturday. A Grade 1 Bluegrass Stakes drew a field of 11. We talked Turfway, a couple horses that were 1-2 in the Battaglia Memorial, Encino, and also Epic Ride. They switched to the dirt, so we're going to see a little synthetic to dirt action here. Maybe we get a sense of how those horses stack up with the division, with those Turfway alumni Encino Ride and Encino and Epic Ride going here. But of course, the headliners are Sierra Leone and Dornoch. They rematched from their Remsen Stakes last fall. Since then, Dornoch's gone on to win the Fountain of Youth. Sierra Leone came back and won the Risen Star. You've got Just a Touch, who was in the Gotham Stakes, going for a more speedy type race in the Bluegrass than going back to the Wood Memorial. So this is a very interesting group in here. You got Seize the Gray coming back on short rest, trying to cram some Kentucky Derby qualifying points in there. This is a good bunch, Jeff. This might be the best, deepest field we've had so far this prep season.
Critical race for Sierra Leone if he wants to have any chance of beating Fierceness, or at least his connections want to think they have a chance. He's going to have to run well here. And I dare say he should win. If he's going to beat Fierceness, he should be able to beat this field.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dornock's going to run well. I like where he's drawn. I mean, he's a colt that, because he's been so green and backward and all that, we don't know what he's going to be like if he ever figures things out. And maybe with racing, he'll do just that. So absolutely an outstanding race and a critical race for horses if they have any kind of hope to have any kind of chance at Churchill Downs.
And we try to match these horses up across different regions. This is where we get a clash at Keeneland a lot. The Snowbirds are coming north. Some New York horses are coming for a little more warmer climate. They're trying to get closer to Churchill Downs and have the easy van ride over and get set for the Derby. We get a good chance to see where these horses stack up. Dornock did win the Fountain of Youth, but the Fountain of Youth horses came back and did nothing in the Florida Derby. They were very disappointing. So it looked like a poor Fountain of Youth field when Dornock won it. Remember, the field just fell apart. You had the scratches, all the scratches coming into the race, the pre-race runoff by the Pletcher horse Tuscan Sky in there. A lot fell apart with the Fountain of Youth and fell into the lap of Dornock. He's going to have to run a much improved race from the Fountain of Youth to beat that group in the Bluegrass on Saturday.
Yeah, I think so, and I think he will. I think he's capable of stepping forward. The question is how much,
right.
And we'll see. But everybody now, I mean, has got a benchmark here to look at. And that's a scary one,
Yeah.
We keep going back to Fierceness, and because we haven't really seen a prep race like that in a long time. I mean, as good as the Triple Crown winners were, American Pharaoh and Justify, they didn't do that, I mean, so for this colt to do that, it really kind of puts the others on their heels and
right.
Looking for a contender here. And we talked about, the future book and why take a short price when you're going to probably get something similar on Derby Day? I'm not so sure. What do you think? Everything goes equal. What do you think we're looking at a price on the favorite here on Derby Day on the tote?
2-1.
You think so?
Yeah, it's hard to get something to 5. It's really hard to get something to 5.
Yeah.
And I think let's hedge that with that Sierra Leone wins, and there's an obvious second choice, because an obvious second choice is in that 9-2 range, if you've got a 2-1, and then that's a lot of money in Kentucky Derby win pool. Plus, there's a lot of stupid bets in the win pool based on names. If Timberlake decides they want to run, all the Justin Timberlake fans are going to bet the horse. I mean, so in the win pool, you get some goofy stuff there that spreads the money out. Long shots win the Derby, and all of a sudden, nobody wants to play short prices anymore, and so therefore, you have no top end horses. The top end horse is 40-1 instead of 100-1. So I say 2-1 right now is probably what you're looking at on Fierceness. But if Sierra Leone doesn't come with anything and there's no clear cut second choice in there, you could get the 9-5, but I think you got to go back to Point Given, the last horse that was less than 2-1 in the Derby. I mean, as dominant as Big Brown was and some of the others, I mean, 2-1 is kind of about as low as you can get on Derby Day. So he'll push that, though. He will push that to the limit, I'm sure, and be a very solid favorite. But, if we get a dominant performance by Sierra Leone on Saturday, now it's not easy go or Sunday silence, but you have two horses that are clearly better than the rest, who haven't faced each other yet. And so you get that little bit of uncertainty, and there might be a camp for one and a camp for the other. But we need that second horse to step up, or there is going to be a big gap between Fierceness and everybody else on the tote board.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, I'll tell you what, I'm not saying I'm betting I'm at 2-1, but I will have bet on a lot worse 2-1s.
Right.
It goes off at 2-1.
I've got this in my I did a little advanced work on Countdown to the Crown for this coming Friday. And if you're playing in the futures right now, I think you really want to look at the exactas, because there's 40 wagering interest in the exactas. Mm-hmm. So if you want to bet Fierceness and you think that price is going to be too short in the futures or on race day, play now, because the exacta is like 40 by 39, which is like I don't know, like 12, 13,000 combinations. On Derby Day, like it's like 1/10 the number of combinations. 20 times 19 is a heck of a lot less than 40 times 39.
Right.
When you figure out how many losing tickets there are to pay the winning ticket. So the exacta play is going to be a very good bet this week coming up in the future wager if you like fierceness. So maybe even take an all, and you play $1 all fierceness overall and spend $39. But catching the $1 exacta on Derby Day could turn out to be a lot more lucrative than catching a $39 win bet would be on fierceness when you're looking at the potential for, for the exacta payout. So something to keep in mind there. We do have an updated countdown of the Crown top 20 or 10, or what do we want to call this, Jeff? I wimped out. I stopped doing the top 20 because I got to the bottom and I have so many horses that are in the clubhouse and qualified on points for the Kentucky Derby. But then we've got all the horses who are ineligible to run in the Derby, and limiting it to the 20 isn't going to give us the Derby field at this point in the season. So I just said to heck with it. Here are 10 that I feel good about, and then the rest are in my mix and match category over there with a good race. Maybe they move up. Maybe some of the horses on the mix and match side won't run in the Derby, but we'll see in them in the Preakness or Belmont. But as far as it goes, fierceness clear cut number 1. I moved Muth up a spot or 2. I dropped Forever Young below the 2 Baffords. I thought the race was good in Japan, but I expect a big race out of May Moon this coming week, and I thought that Forever Young needed to take a bigger step forward in order to hold that number 3 spot. But you see, he's still the 3rd favorite for the Kentucky Derby on my list because those 2 Baffert horses aren't in there. And I think right now, if they bet the race, Fierceness, Sierra Leone, Forever Young would be the 1, 2, 3 wagering choices in the Kentucky Derby. I brought Endlessly back into the pool. I think he's got a big shot, like you had talked about. We both have a lot of respect for him. And Resilience is a horse I love in the Wood Memorial coming up this Saturday. I thought his race was a better than it looked 4th in the Risen Star, and there is nobody in that Risen or in the Wood Memorial race that's got the credentials of the horses out of the Risen Star. We will see with Deterministic if he's got the talent to win the Wood and stretch out off that Gotham. But as far as the credentials go, I thought Resilience faced a much tougher field in Louisiana than he'll face in New York coming up this Saturday. So that's the way my top 10 shake out. And if you look at it this way, Tuscan Gold's being aimed at the Preakness by Chad Brown. You got 2 Baffords ineligible. 3 of the top 10 aren't even going to be running the first Saturday in May.
Yeah, I think that you've given very good wagering advice trying to hit that exacta this weekend. I think that's where the value is. If you think, whoever you think, but if you think Fierceness is going to be less than 2 to 1 or no bigger than 2 to 1, maybe that's way to go. And I can see horses like Forever Young, Endlessly. I could kind of lean on them with the idea that I might be able to hit that pretty good, and maybe throwing a couple other prices in there. But I think that might be the way to go if you want to bet this race, is try to hit the exacta.
So it's 1,560 combos in an exacta, 40 times 39. And when you get to Derby Day, there's 380, 20 times 19. So 1,500 versus 380. It's about 5 times as many potential combinations in the exacta and the future wagers than it would actually be on Derby Day. That's why I'm saying that's the good value play this time around. And if you think you have a free space like you're playing bingo and Fierceness is going to win the race, basically you're getting a lot of math working for you in the payoff department to try to figure out who the other horse is. And essentially you're making a future wager to run second, but you could get a big overlay price on that versus what you will get on Kentucky Derby Day. So that's a wrap for our Triple Crown tracker, but we're going to head back to Dubai as we get to topic 4 on the program this week. Laurel River was once a hot shot for Bob Baffert on the West Coast, running races at Del Mar, maybe up to the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Since heading over to Dubai, though, he just kind of went in the witness protection program. We didn't see him, and he reappeared this year. And I don't think they saw him in the Dubai World Cup either, Jeff. He was about 10 in front, turning for home, and they got further in the rearview mirror from there.
Laurel River has had it pretty easy up in front, hasn't had to work too hard, but Defunded and Laurel River clear away from the rest. They lead a half a dozen lengths. Dura Eriday into third. Kabir Khan sneaks up, hasn't gone around the horse so far. Newgate pressed the issue out wider. Frankie Dettori asking the Bob Baffert runner to lift here in the late stages. Senor Buscador was next, followed there by Derma Soligake, already under a ride from Wilson Tesoro, Krupi. Ushpa Tesoro third to last from Clapton. Military Law drops out of it. Laurel River has given them the slip here. Laurel River puts a big break on them here in the Dubai World Cup, the best part of 8 or 9 lengths here, and Juddmonte Farm are close They are 200 metres away from Dubai World Cup success here. He's got 10 lengths now on Senor Buscador. Karbir Khan drops away. Ushba Tesoro coming from a long way back. But this is an absolute romp in the Dubai World Cup. Laurel River, Tygo Shea, take a bow. Dominant in the Dubai World Cup. Photo finish for second. Ushba Tesoro crossed over with Senor Buscador. Then came next over there was Wilson Tesoro from Dura Eride. Followed there next by Derma Soligake, Defunded, Krupi. Then came Clapton, Karbir Khan dropped away. Newgate was second last, and the last one home, a long last to Military Law.
What a dominant performance. We've seen that over the years in the Dubai World Cup, that every once in a while you get something like that. Recall Well Armed coming from the U.S. and putting a lick on him like he did that day way back when. I want to say about 2009, 2010, something like that for Well Armed. But what a performance by Laurel River. If this race was a mile, maybe we could see him winning it. But at a mile and a quarter, wow.
Laurel River was a horse that I know very well because he was out here in California to start his career, and he won. Keep in mind, this horse is a perfect 3 for 3 at Del Mar, whereas the Breeders' Cup Classic this year in Del Mar, and that's going to be the ultimate goal for a horse that, if you remember the morning of the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland a couple years ago, and this was my best bet of the day in the Breeders' Cup.
I remember.
And when he was scratched, I couldn't believe it. It was the Breeders' Cup, the first one that Cody's Wish won. That was going to be my major play of the year, not just the meeting, the year, because I knew this horse so well. I'd watched him train. I'd watched him run. I'd seen him up close and personal. I visited him because I really thought he had that kind of ability. And being a son of Inner Mischief, I always felt that there was not a limit to how good he could be if he could be made healthy. So not only was he scratched on the morning of the Breeders' Cup, he didn't run for, until 2024. He was gone. Okay. And so I did feel that, well, whatever it was must have been pretty serious. Okay. And Bob doesn't train him anymore. And I usually don't like to play horses that leave that barn. So then he comes back first time out in Dubai, and he's terrible. He doesn't run a yard. I figured this horse is finished, He comes back and he wins a race, but so what? Grade 3 event. I tried to find him on the video. I couldn't find it. So I just kind of, whatever. Outside post, it's a mile and a quarter. You can't run that far anyway. About the top of the stretch, I'm saying I should have put in that extra weight. There's nobody catching him. I think it was like 8 or 9 to 1. So now, if he can stay healthy and stay sound and run back to this race, or run back to some of the great races he ran at Del Mar back in 2021 and 22, man, I could see him a serious player, in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I know now that that's the long range goal. He was devastating in this race, and there was nothing flukish about it. He was used hard on the outside to get to the front, shrugged off London. It was a decent sort of horse, and he else had a chance. So I was thoroughly impressed with Laurel River.
Ushba Tesoro came with his run for a photo finish second over Senor Buscador, who just continues to give an effort every single time. And what a road trip for Senor Buscador, winning the $12 million $20 million Saudi Cup, and it's $12 million first prize, and then running third here in the $12 million Dubai World Cup. So a fabulous road trip for Senor Buscador. Look forward to seeing him back here stateside for owner Joey Peacock and trainer Todd Fincher. So an international cast. I mean, you had the American expatriate running for the Dubai Connections, and of course Saudi Arabia's Juddmonte Farm there. The Japanese ran second with Ushba Tesoro with their legendary runner, and then the defending champion in the Dubai World Cup as well. And then, of course, Senor Buscador ran his race as well, but nobody was running with Laurel River in that one. Jeff, remember the old commercial, the Maytag repairman? They said it was the loneliest guy because he never had any work, that Maytags never broke down.
Right. I remember him.
Commercials, yeah. Well, I think the Maytag repairman worked in photo finishes this past week because he was not needed anywhere. He got the complete week off. If you were a photo finish operator in the big races last week, you need not apply nor check anything out because these were all blowouts. And as we go to our star of tomorrow, another massive win margin to set up as Mindframe was just dominant on the undercard. This was Pletcher and Rapoli, Florida Derby Day. And we've often said this a lot. When you've got a good first-time starter to unleash, a lot of times it'll be on an undercard when one of your other superstars is running. They saved this one for Florida Derby Day. Check out Mindframe, our star of tomorrow for this week.
Mindframe really picks it up nicely. He's out in the center of the racetrack and gaining good ground on the embattled duo who have gone awfully quick. Mindframe at even money is on the scene now. Quarter of a mile left to go. It's Mindframe, the leader. From last, Value Cajun tries to follow him through and claim second at a big price, but Mindframe has kicked it in. Mindframe, this hype was real hype as Mindframe is running up the score here. A very impressive run from Mindframe. His first career start, a winning one by Florida Derby winner Constitution. Mindframe by 10 in the end.
He was even bigger than that. 13 3/4, the official margin in there. Fierceness like. What do we do with a horse that's this late debuting, and with the Triple Crown Series what it is? They have other options, of course, with Fierceness. So do we take the conservative route now with Mindframe?
That's the best thing that Mindframe's got going for them, is that they've already got one that do all the big, heavy lifting. Mindframe can kind of go at his own pace now. There's no rush. I mean, you'd think maybe a race like the Peter Pan or something like that would be possible. Now winners of 2, why not?
Right.
But no, I think they're going to take their time with him. There's no reason to rush. They've already got a big hitter in the division. So let this colt develop at his own rate. They gave 600 for him. He's by Constitution. His bottom line is okay, not great. There must be a great looking colt to bring that kind of money. And you don't fool Todd Pletcher too often at the sales. So I think Mindframe, Triple Crown nominated, but I don't think they're going to go to do anything crazy with him. I think they'll let him step right through his conditions or the minor 3-year-old stakes or secondary 3-year-old stakes, and maybe by time Saratoga rolls along, then he has time to step up against the big boys.
A horse he may run into at some point in time also made his return at Gulfstream Park last week. His name is Knightsbridge. He had run at Churchill in the fall and was absolutely dominant, but he was slow to come around this year, was supposed to run earlier in the meet at Gulfstream and didn't get back. Bill Mott took his time with him, as he's apt to do, and brought him back in allowance company last Thursday. Let's take a look at this one because he hasn't run in a stakes yet, but he will be soon.
So Knightsbridge has one to fight off as they run to the top of the stretch, and he's right alongside. It's C Streak and Knightsbridge for a quarter of a mile confrontation. They're 8 ahead of Speed Control, who just ran into third from Turn Up the Trees, and they're at the top of the stretch. Junior Alvarado and the son of Nyquist, Knightsbridge, now get a clear lead. They're 3 on top. C Streak has done everything he can, but what he cannot do is stay with Knightsbridge. Knightsbridge delivers a big-time run in his seasonal debut. He'll be geared down and 6 lengths in front. Knightsbridge, sharp.
I like this horse a lot, Jeff. Off that maiden win, I had him ranked number 3 in my Countdown to the Crown preseason rankings. Had he not had the setback early in the season, I think he would have been a major player in South Florida on the stakes scene. Now he's kind of late to the party. Could this be one for the Belmont Stakes, perhaps, for Mott getting to New York in the 1.25 miles?
Yeah, absolutely. He's another Nyquist, as is Nysos. 2 top horse colts couldn't make the Derby, but I'm pretty confident they're going to be heard from somewhere, maybe not together, but somewhere, somehow later this summer, maybe out here in California with Nysos, and certainly wherever Knightsbridge wants to race, wherever they want him to go. But these are 2 colts that are still laying in the wings. I'm not sure if Fierceness, whoever he beats in the Derby, will be beating the best in his division. That might come a little later on. But these 2 colts that I just mentioned look like they might be as good, if not better, than anything that is currently on the Derby trail other than Fierceness.
Mott has indicated that they could go Pat Day Mile on the Derby weekend undercard. So that would be a really good spot, staying around 1 turn, 1 more shot over a track he's already won at Churchill Downs. And that timing-wise could get him 5 weeks to the Belmont, or they just reload and say, let's work towards a Travers campaign or a potential Haskell campaign. Of course, the Haskell is always one of those races for the horses that are speedier and not necessarily classic distance horses to really look at, because it's a 1.125 miles over a track that carries speed at Monmouth. So if you've got a fast and brilliant 3-year-old and they're late to the Triple Crown party, the best thing you can do, in my estimation, is look at the Haskell and work your way backwards from there and see if you can't get that grade 1 candy at 1.125 miles over a really speedy surface, typically there each summer. That's going to wrap up this week's edition of It's Official. Here are our topics as we finish going over them. The separation at the top is fierceness and everybody else after the Florida Derby. The flattering win in Arkansas was the victory in the Arkansas Derby by Muth, who could not warm up fierceness in last year's Breeders' Cup, and now he's winning in the big races, making fierceness's resume look even stronger. Our Triple Crown tracker took you to the UAE for Forever Young's victory. We talked about Knightsbridge, we talked about our top 20 and how that shakes out, and we looked ahead to the Bluegrass Stakes coming up this weekend. Cry Me a River. Oh, Jeff Siegel, that was his best bet for the Breeders' Cup, but he had to watch him win the Dubai World Cup. It was a dominant victory for Laurel River by 8.5 lengths, and we reviewed that one. And our star of tomorrow this week was Mindframe for trainer Todd Pletcher, huge winner by 13+ on the Florida Derby undercard. Those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I said so. That's how we play the game, and we'll rack it up next week with 5 more topics on the big board. And you could bet there's going to be a lot of Wood Memorial, Santa Anita Derby, and Bluegrass flavor to those 5 topics. We're also going to have some horses starting to make their way to the grounds at Churchill Downs. Some of the fairgrounds horses are already there and settling in. We got opening weekend at Keeneland with that big Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies 1-2-3 rematch coming up Friday in the Ashland. Saturday's cards loaded with stakes races. They just drew that today, Tuesday for Saturday. So this is going to be a great weekend of racing, Jeff, and we're going to have a lot to talk about next week.
I looked at that card at Keeneland on Friday. I said, man, why can't we have this like every day? You know, I guarantee you there would be no wagering deficits if we could, you know.
Right.
I mean, the bottom line is this. Great racing, great cards, great gambling opportunities, big fields. That's what brings the handle in.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I mean, there's reasons, obviously, but Keeneland does it. Nobody does it any better than Keeneland. It's as simple as that, you know.
Should be a fantastic meet. Looking forward to handicapping each and every race. So be sure to check out my thoughts at the Keeneland website. And, of course, bet those races with First Bet and Express Bet throughout the course of the meet at Keeneland. Also, good note on the takeout front. They lowered the takeout on daily double wagers from 22% down to 15%. So a lower takeout daily double at Keeneland to try to encourage a little more churn. I like the investment into lower probability bets, or lower risk bets, I should say, with higher probabilities of win. I know a lot of horse players out there are chasing the pick 4s, the pick 5s, pick 6s, but that's not great for churn. It doesn't keep you in the game as easy. And so a lower takeout bet on a more reasonable bet that you could win can turn over money more often and keep you in the game more. So keep an eye on those daily doubles. Be sure to check those out if you're playing Keeneland here throughout the course of the meet. And if you're a big proponent of lower takeouts, speak with your dollars. The lower takeout it will be accepted by more and more jurisdictions around the country if those wagers are handling more and more cash, and they show that the people will send it in for them. Certainly endorse a lower takeout anywhere where we can and where it's economically feasible to do so as a horse player here, first and foremost in everything that I do. So that wraps up this week's show on It's Official. Jeff and I will be back on Friday to handicap a big weekend series of stakes races. The Friday podcast is called First Call, and we'll have that for you coming up this weekend. On behalf of everybody with First Technologies, my partner Jeff Siegel, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great week. We'll talk to you Friday.